take each other to court a lot. I believe we're the most litigious society in all of history. How did we get to be that way? What do you think Jesus thinks about us taking each other to court so much? Can you imagine Jesus suing people for treating him wrong? A lot of people treated him wrong. I'm Brian Bateman, and this is Red Letter Blueprint, Jesus' 52 Rules for Joy. Jesus said, "Why can't you decide for yourselves what is right? When you're on the way to court with your accuser, try to settle the matter before you get there. Otherwise, your accuser may drag you before the judge, who will hand you over to an officer who will throw you into prison. And if that happens, you won't be free again until you have paid the very last penny." Luke 12, 57 through 59. In the Bible, Jesus put a lot of emphasis on following his commands, and he made certain promises about following his commands, like he would reveal himself to us, and we would experience overflowing joy. Jesus said, "When you obey my commandments, you remain in my love, just as I obey my Father's commandments and remain in his love. I have told you these things so that you will be filled with my joy. Yes, your joy will overflow." That's John 15, 10 through 11. So I studied all of Jesus's words in the Bible, the red letters, that's the name of this series, and I found everything that sounded like a command. I found 52 commands, one for each week of the year. 13 commands are related to our relationship with God. 13 are related to our relationships with people. 13 are related to our values, and 13 are related to our actions. I want to know Jesus better, and I want to experience more of this overflowing joy. So I'm doing this deep dive, and you are invited on the journey. Jesus told us to resolve our conflicts rather than taking each other to court. What was the context in which he gave us this command? He was preaching to a crowd of thousands when suddenly this happened. Then someone called from the crowd, "Teacher, please tell my brother to divide our father's estate with me." Jesus replied, "Friend, who made me a judge over you to decide such things as that?" Then he said, "Beware. Guard against every kind of greed. Life is not measured by how much you own." Then he told them a story. A rich man had a fertile farm that produced fine crops. He said to himself, "What should I do? I don't have room for all my crops." Then he said, "I know, I'll tear down my barns and build bigger ones. Then I'll have room enough to store all my wheat and other goods. And I'll sit back and say to myself, 'My friend, you have enough stored away for years to come. Now take it easy, eat, drink, and be merry.' But God said to him, 'You fool, you will die this very night. Then who will get everything you worked for?' Yes, a person is a fool to store up earthly wealth, but not have a rich relationship with God." Luke 12, 13 through 21. So in the first part of Luke 12, Jesus is talking to the accuser when he says, "Beware, guard against every kind of greed. Life is not measured by what you own." But later in Luke 12, he's talking to the accused when he said, "When you are on your way to court with the accuser, try to settle the matter before you get there." So he's saying, really, it's up to the accuser and the accused to resolve the matter before you get to court. The Apostle Paul expounds on Jesus' command in 1 Corinthians. He said, "If any of you has a dispute with another, do you dare take it before the ungodly for judgment instead of before the Lord's people? Or do you not know that the Lord's people will judge the world? And if you were to judge the world, are you not competent to judge trivial cases? Do you not know that we will judge angels? How much more the things of this life? Therefore, if you have disputes about such matters, do you ask for a ruling from those whose way of life is scorned in the church? I say this to shame you. Is it possible there is nobody among you wise enough to judge a dispute between believers? Instead, one brother takes another to court, and this in front of unbelievers. The very fact that you have lawsuits among you means you have been completely defeated already. Why not rather be wronged? Why not rather be cheated? 1 Corinthians 6, 1 through 7. Paul and Jesus believed that it would be better to be wronged and to face injustice rather than to bring shame and disunity to the church and to the gospel. Here's why it's wrong to take each other to court, according to Paul. First of all, God's judgment. Paul reminds us that Christians will one day judge the world, and angels, by the way. And if we're not capable of judging these smaller issues, how are we ever going to do that? To take each other to court shows that we are lacking faith in our ability to resolve conflict and lack of faith in Jesus' ability to work through us to resolve conflict. The second reason it's wrong is the scandal that it would bring to the church in front of unbelievers and would create disunity in the church. All of it is a terrible witness. The third reason is unjust judges. Paul warns us that the outcomes would not necessarily be righteous because there are so many unrighteous judges. The solution, first of all, is reconciliation. It's better to accept a wrong and be reconciled to your accuser or to the accused than to take them to court. Second, prioritize unity. Put others before yourselves. We'll talk more about that in a second. Third, embrace sacrifice. Paul challenges the Corinthians to consider the higher calling of Christ and to be willing to sacrifice their own rights for the sake of the church's unity and for the sake of the gospel. We sue each other because people wrong us. We bring charges against each other because people violate our rights. Here's what the great 20th century theologian Dietrich Bonhoeffer said. Jesus Christ lived in the midst of his enemies. At the end, all his disciples deserted him. On the cross, he was utterly alone, surrounded by evildoers and mockers. For this cause he had come to bring peace to the enemies of God. So the Christian too belongs not in the seclusion of a cloistered life, but in the thick of foes. There is his commission, his work. And then Bonhoeffer quotes Martin Luther. The kingdom is to be in the midst of your enemies, and he who will not suffer this does not want to be of the kingdom of Christ. He wants to be among friends, to sit among roses and lilies, and not with the bad people, but the devout people. Oh, you blasphemers and betrayers of Christ. If Christ had done what you were doing, who would have ever been spared? So both Bonhoeffer and Martin Luther are talking about how we need to bring the gospel out among our enemies. But the point is that Jesus did not insist upon being treated well. Maybe we shouldn't either. The context in which conflict is resolved best is in the context of community. And one way 21st century Americans are historically unique is that most of us don't really live in community. We like to mind our own business, and we don't like to get involved in other people's business. Years ago, I spent a couple weeks among the residents of Oahu, Hawaii. And I was really surprised to discover that not only don't they lock their doors, they just have screen doors. And they just walk in and out of each other's homes freely. They don't even knock, they just walk in and out. And the line between family and neighbors and friends, those lines are very blurred. The children call their parents friends and their neighbors auntie and uncle. All this was very new to me. But later, as I traveled around the world on mission trips, I discovered that that culture is not actually unusual, except in the continental US. We are a very private people, and I think it's no coincidence that the people who live outside of community are the most litigious people in history as well. The Apostle Paul painted a picture of what community could look like in Colossians 2. This is a fertile ground for spiritual growth. He said, my goal, when he says my goal, you got to pay attention. My goal is that they may be encouraged in heart and united in love, so that they may have the full riches of complete understanding, in order that they may know the mystery of God, namely Christ, in whom are hidden all the treasures of wisdom and knowledge. Colossians 2, 2-3. Let's follow this backwards. Wouldn't you like to possess all the treasures of wisdom and knowledge? Of course. How do you get there? I'll bet if we had that, we wouldn't be suing each other quite as much. So how do we develop all the treasures of wisdom and knowledge? According to this verse, by knowing Christ, the mystery of God, namely Christ. And how do we know this mystery? So what is the fertile ground in which we can learn to understand Christ? Paul calls this his goal, that we may be encouraged in heart and united in love. So what does it look like to live in a community that's encouraged in heart and united in love? Well, Paul paints another picture over in Philippians 2. He says, therefore, if you have any encouragement from being united with Christ, if any comfort from his love, if any fellowship with the Spirit, if any tenderness and compassion, then make my joy complete by being like-minded, having the same love, being one in spirit and of one mind. Do nothing out of selfish ambition or vain conceit. Rather, in humility, value others above yourselves, not looking to your own interests, but each of you to the interests of others. In your relationships with one another, have the same mindset as Christ Jesus. Philippians 2, 1-5. What if we did live in the kind of Christian community that put each other's needs before our own, that sacrificed our own interests in the interest of others? I'm not just talking about going to church on Sunday mornings. I mean really developing close community with other believers. You could be the spark that ignites that kind of community. The Christian writer Philip Yancey said, family is the one human institution we have no choice over. We get in simply by being born, and as a result, we are involuntarily thrown together with a menagerie of strange and unlike people. Church calls for another step, to voluntarily choose to band together with a strange menagerie because of a common bond in Jesus Christ. I have found that such a community more resembles a family than any other human institution. So the body of Christ, or at least your little corner of it, should look like a family. You should be working to figure out how to get along, how to fit together, how to love each other. You should not be taking each other to court. I would love to hear your response to these things, so please leave a message. If you got anything out of this episode, please like it and share it on your social media and subscribe to this channel so you don't miss any episodes. Next week, we're going to talk about Jesus' command, give up everything you own to follow Jesus. Thank you for joining me on this journey. I'll see you. Anyone who has my commands and obeys them loves me. My Father will love the one who loves me. I too will love him, and I must show myself to him. John chapter 14,